So I wanted to talk about how I'm making stuff for this food catalog of mine. I like to make inserts for my books that are made of the different food boxes and the different kinds that you like to add to your book. And I found that I don't really like punching holes through them because it will, snap through some of the letters and get rid of some of the descriptions on the ingredients or whatever. So I came up with a way to get around that. And there are different kinds that you can do. You see this little thing here? I took a Pop-Tart box and I just disassemble it, and I flipped some of the tabs over and I made it kind of like a file folder type little thing. And then what I do is I poke little holes and sew some thread through it so that there's a thread area that you can just slip over the loops. And I will show you how I do this. It's really, really simple. And here's a bigger one just to show you a little bit extra of a step. Now I'll tell you how I do this, and there are two different kinds that you can do for your catalog or whatever you're making. What I do is I take one of these cardboard boxes, and most standard food boxes will have a seam where some of it is glued. So what I do is I find the seam on my box, and I usually use a bone folder or a letter opener in this case, and you just gently wedge it underneath the spot that lifts, and you gently pull and press down with the folder or the letter opener so that the cardboard comes up without ripping. And you just don't want to go too quickly with this, otherwise you can ruin some of the details, and the paper will rip and get in the way. So just go very slowly, go from the other side, make sure you get that up, and tear it a little bit. You can also wedge under here and get that torn. Okay, so this is kind of messy. I'm not always this messy, but after you do that, you'll have your box. And what I do with my boxes after that is I simply go to the tabs here and I'll just cut them off, and I'll save spots that are containing the names or labels or anything that I like that's part of the box, and I will glue that back inside in this part. Here, I'll show you an example. This box I already disassembled. I saved part of the tab from this box and just glued it on the inside so that I could keep it as a record or whatever. So there are two things that I do, and I figured out how I like to make my books. You want to cut off this part, and after you either cut off your tabs or decide to keep them, you can make a file folder by folding your box tabs over and not cutting them off, and then bending this side over the edge very carefully and kind of fidgeting around with it and bending it. And then you just measure areas right here and here, and you glue those spots, and you'll end up with a folder area that kind of just lets you slip things in between. So it's really that simple. And what I do after that is I take my box and I decide which direction I want it to go in the book, and I will line it up with the loops here. And once I figure out how I want it to sit in my book, I'll just mark on either side of each hole onto the box, a little bit of pencil mark, and then I go in and I take a pokey tool, and I will poke holes through the marked spots on either side. So what you end up with is a little spot, I'm not sure if you can see it, a little spot right here and here on your box. And I tend to do this near a seam area, so in this case it would be this part here that I poke my holes. And once you do that, you just take your needle and thread and you just knot it and then go through your holes. You want to measure out around the loops and go through. So yeah, in the case with this, I would just make a knot with my thread, and then I would go through these holes here, and then I kind of just guess about where I want my loops to be. So I usually guess about, you know, I usually make a guess with about that much space on my holes, and I try to even it up on both, or all sections. And then once I get those down, you can leave them free floating, but I suggest putting some tape over the knots before you use them, or in recent cases I make the knots and I tie off each loop, and then I glue down the tabs so that those knots aren't going anywhere. So that's really just a little simple tip I wanted to give, and you can try it and you can make your own things. And I will be getting back to this book eventually to show you what all I've done in it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And then it just flips out like that, and you get to write stuff in there and write about the food and do whatever you like. So simple.